We just read in Hebrews, "For it was fitting that he, for whom and through whom all things exist, in bringing many children to glory, should make the leader to their salvation perfect through suffering." And first, it's important to understand that sin, suffering, and death enter into the world through the first sin. It's not God's original plan for humanity. And the other beautiful part is God enters into it. So he's not disconnected from anyone's suffering. The God or the saving God in Christ is not disconnected from your suffering in any way, shape, or form, but enters into it and kind of redeems it. And that's what I'll be talking about shortly. But one of the things about suffering is it's inevitable. And this is why the question of suffering kind of arises. What's the cause? What's the reason? What's the purpose? And on one side, suffering can exist because of sin. One of Job's friends states, "I have seen those who plow iniquity and sow trouble reap the same." Also, St. John Paul II, in his apostolic letter on suffering, mentions the God of Revelation is the lawgiver and judge to a degree that no temporal authority can see. In other words, no one gets away with their sin or evil. And this is something that needs to be ingrained in our heart and mind. And secondly, the psalmist states about his own sins, "Lord, I know that your decrees are right, and that you afflicted me justly." Or in another place, "I strove to fathom this problem too hard for my mind to understand, until I pierced the mysteries of God and came to understand what becomes of the wicked." But in Job's case and in that of Christ, we see a person suffering innocently. While it is true that suffering has a meaning of punishment when it is connected to a fault, it is not true that all suffering is a consequence of a fault and has the nature of a punishment. These are the words from St. John Paul II in his apostolic letter on suffering. And in the case of Job, Satan challenges God, basically saying he only believes in God and is righteous because you gave him many good things on earth. And God allows the suffering to prove Job's integrity of heart, his true love of God, and his true love of righteousness for its own sake. After losing everything, he has the famous words, "The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." And his other words, "Naked I came forth from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return." And finally, in Christ, suffering is transformed to have this real salvific dimension. Christ goes toward his suffering aware of its saving power. He suffers voluntarily and innocently to sanctify and save the whole world. And we are baptized, and when we are baptized into Christ. And in this way, our own suffering can have a redeeming quality. It goes on in his letter, "Each man in his suffering can also become a sharer in the redemptive suffering of Christ." This is the old adage, offer it up for the salvation of another person when you are suffering. And in this way, no suffering is meaningless. But in this mysterious way, all suffering has a purpose.